Welcome back, audience and viewers, and those that are going to be watching later. I'm Cate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary and host of Goaldigger, Finding Your Voice, right here on LinkedIn Live. I took a bit of a hiatus for the summer, and we are in full force back for the fall, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome our guest, Natalie Nixon, who I was introduced through by another friend and mentor and also Luminary member, Eve Rodsky. So big shout out to Eve. Fell in love immediately with Natalie when she was at an event at Luminary. She became a member. And then I got to learn, Natalie, about everything that you have done and are doing. And we're going to get into that. So welcome. And we're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Cate. It's great to be here. I love everything about Luminary. So it's a real pleasure to talk with you today.
And you look gorgeous as always. So we always got to prop up ourselves. So let's go back. I always rewind a little bit because for me, and certainly for what we're building at Luminary, it's really important to share our stories. And oftentimes we can read a bio and miss a lot in a bio. So could you share a bit about your story and really what brought you to where you're at today? We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about the 3 I's. We're going to talk about getting older, and we're going to condense a lot into 30 minutes.
Well, I always half jokingly say I have a really loopy background. I guess a kinder way of saying this, I have a very diverse background. And I really got to where I am today, which is today I'm a creativity strategist, CEO and founder of Figure Eight Thinking. I advise leaders who feel stuck and companies who are in kind of laggard sectors to transform their business models through applying wonder and rigor. And my loopy background consists of a background in cultural anthropology, fashion, design thinking. I was an academic, a professor for 16 years. I've lived in 5 different countries. I'm a lifelong dancer. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm an African-American woman. I'm from Philly. And so all of those experiences and identities have converged to today to help me do the work that I love, which is to help people understand that creativity is not a nice to have, it's a must have.
Yeah.
And we all have a creative capacity that we can build and grow.
So there's so much to dive into and dig into there. But let's talk about what's happening today in the world, right? We're still in a pandemic. We're potentially about to enter a recession. You've got lots of anxiety about returning to an office. You've got layoffs, all of these things. And then rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth. But you've got all this stuff happening. You talk about leaders being stuck. I would think never before have leaders been stuck because we've been dealing with so much over the last couple of years.
Yeah, we're stuck in old mental models and really all culture change, which fundamentally in my practice, that's what it ends up coming down to is culture change. I keep saying I'm going to make a t-shirt that says it's culture silly, because at the end of the day, whether it's trying to figure out how to grow better market share or build and design more meaningful teams and products and experiences and services that really have impact, it comes down to culture. So how does culture shift? It starts out by shifting your mental models, both as an individual as well as an organization. And then that leads to shifts in behaviors, how we interact with one another. And then finally, that leads to culture change, which does not happen overnight. And so that stuckness is really, I really view the last 2.5 years as an energetic invitation from the universe to pause, to take stock, and to reframe the ways that we have been working and going about business. So we rethink about new opportunities for growth, new opportunities for how we optimize the technology that is ubiquitous so that it doesn't take over our lives, but actually helps us to show up more fully human.
What are the biggest challenges? And this is, leaders have challenges well before the pandemic, right? What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing with those leaders that are stuck, or they're trying to really create or evolve that culture within their organization? Because like you said, it doesn't happen overnight, but it does start at the top.
The biggest challenges revolve around this modern contemporary office, which is super hybrid, where for people who've been hired within the past 2 years, they may have never met any members of their team. So, how do you build that meaningful connection in order to do the best work? Because I think that we often forget that organizations are organisms. As they are organisms, I say that they're organisms because they're made up of human beings who are not predictable, who are imperfect, who are inconsistent. So whether or not at the end of the day, the value proposition is around finance or healthcare or public policy or technology, we're not actually going to deliver the best work if we don't understand that fundamentally we have to develop meaningful connections. So that's a big issue that I find consistently. So how do we build and design meaningful ways to connect with one another in the midst of this very tenuous virtual environment? And one of the ways to do that is to actually lean into the hybridity of the moment and not insist on only leaning on the technology. People are burning out at a very rapid rate, and they will continue to unless organizations don't allow and incentivize people to pause, really put a cap on the number of meetings throughout a day so that there's just meeting churn. I'm predicting that in person and high touch convenings are going to become premium because people really do enjoy the flexibility that they have for parenting purposes, parenting their own children or helping their aging parents, their own self-care, in addition to needing to navigate these blurred boundaries between work and home. So that's a really big one that I see consistently.
Yeah, I think this whole concept, we the word flexibility, I think it's like this giant umbrella, but that opportunity to have the convenience of being able to, yes, stress that importance of being in person, and we all want that, but making it much more robust around what's happening on those in-person occasions, and then leveraging the convenience and the opportunity that remote and that flexibility provides, I think is so important. Whether you're running a small business all the way to the large global businesses.
Yes.
I mean, and we've seen on our tour, right? We're on this national tour. We've hit 5 cities thus far because our community grew so large. Like you're in Philadelphia, you're not in New York, where people are still wanting, though. They love this virtual opportunity and that convenience, but they want connection. And
Yes.
I've seen that. It's amazing to me when someone comes in, this is my first event I've been to since COVID, right? It's
Yes.
2.5 years. Two of the words that you used early on and you use in your book is this idea of rigor and wonder, right? Which when I think of traditional leaders, those two words don't even come anywhere in that realm. Can you talk a little bit about this concept of rigor and wonder? And also creativity, because your entire book is about this.
Yeah, so I wrote the Creativity Leap as an offering, as a way for people who don't necessarily self-define as creative because they're assuming before they read the book that if they aren't an artist or have some sort of artistic practice, there's no way I'm creative. But my perspective is that the best engineers, accountants, lawyers, teachers, farmers, and plumbers are super creative when they are toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. And you're right that in a lot of corporate environments, the words wonder and rigor never get uttered in the boardroom. Now, the other thing I've observed is that people are conflating rigidity for rigor, and they are not the same. So there is a lot of rigidity in some organizations, but it's not necessarily rigorous. And the distinction is that rigor takes into account context and the environment and then adapts. Rigidity says, we said we were going to roll this plan out. We're going to go full stream ahead, even though, alarm bells are ringing. The wonder piece, it's so interesting. When I first started building my practice of figure eight thinking, I was really shy about using the word wonder, especially in initial exploratory meetings and pitch conversations with potential clients, because I thought they would laugh me out the room if I led with creativity, led with wonder. But as I've built this framework and people really understand that there's been some really smart people in our history, Socrates, a Jewish theologian and civil rights activist named Abraham Heschel, who put a lot of credence and belief in the power of wonder. And wonder actually is the foundation for knowledge and for wisdom. And so wonder is about awe, it's about audacity and asking really ginormous, big blue sky questions. It's also about pausing, and rigor, which is the part of creativity that we sometimes forsake, but it's super important as well. Rigor is discipline and focus and mastery of skill and time on task. And it's not particularly sexy and it's often very solitary, but it's super important. Both of those dimensions in an integrated way are essential for all of us to build our creative capacity.
Yeah, it's kind of that balance, right? It's the yin and the yang kind of coming together, but you need both. And I love this. You know, I would be that first person to raise my hand and say, I'm not creative.
Oh,
right.
Yes.
Because that also I've been trained in the corporate world for 20 plus years. Right. And that was not something, as I think about when I read your book, it was like, whoa, all of these things sort of the light bulbs started going on about that idea of creativity and how every single leader, whether you're just starting out all the way to the most seasoned, can apply this. What inspired you? Because you have a lot going on. You work with so many organizations. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, as a global keynote speaker, I really use my keynote opportunities as a way to prototype ideas. The mission in my work is to change lives with ideas. And that was what got me out of bed in the morning when I was a professor, and it's still what gets me out of bed in the morning. I am an intellectual and a nerd and a lifelong learner. And so ideas really turn me on. And as at the top of our conversation, I rooted culture change in beginning with changing the way we think, or shifting our perspective. And so that starts with being able to ask new and different questions. So as I would give keynotes as a way to experiment with how could I offer a really simple and accessible way to help people understand that creativity is totally within your grasp, I would prototype and offer up all these different ideas and frameworks, and you get immediate feedback in a live keynote. And people would increasingly come up to me and say, this was awesome. Where do I read more about this? So I quickly realized if I had a centralized place called a book, in order to allow people to go do exercises, review ideas, get recommended other reading and other thought leaders to check out, that would be a good idea. So that was really the impetus to write the book.
You said in the beginning you're an academic and intellectual. You were a professor for 16 years, which is amazing. What was the journey like in writing the book? Was it long? Was it that ups and downs? Because I've heard lots of different things. Now that I'm at, started Luminary, I get exposed to all these incredible authors. And I always ask that, what was that process like for you?
Well, I've never actually given birth to a child physically through my body, but I'm assuming that there's a lot of parallels between giving birth to a book, and it's both a wondrous and a rigorous process. It starts with a dream. It starts with an idea. And there's the writing the book process, which for me was project management. There was nothing sexy about it. It was sitting down every day and writing something. And then there's the publishing industry process, which is very different. And I have spoken about how I often felt like the unpopular girl at the party, and no one was asking me to dance, and no one even asked me if I knew how to dance. So the publishing industry often felt like this, like the other metaphor I've used is I had on stilettos and a long nailed manicure, and I was trying to scale like a stone. That's often how it felt sometimes. And I was really fortunate after 2 book proposal revisions, 18 months of going out. I don't have a literary agent. I didn't have contacts in the publishing industry. And in a last ditch effort, I contacted about 7 people I knew. And I say that in interviews because some of them we'd never met in person. We were just kind of fans of each other and supporters of each other's work, but they had published much more than had I. And I said, here's a book proposal. I'd be so appreciative if you wouldn't mind sharing this with your publishing network, if it makes sense for you. And one of those people was John Gilmore, who's the co-author of an incredible book called The Experience Economy. And that led to an introduction to the vice president of editorial at Barrett Kohler, who within an 11-day window, I went from being in the doldrums, like, I guess my ideas don't matter, to this is cool, let's have a talk, I want to pitch this idea, to an email which I've saved, which is titled Bravo, in all caps, we want to offer you a book deal.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, and it was not an overnight story.
Right.
It took a lot of deliberation. It took a lot of encouragement from my best friend, my husband, John, who was like, babe, you're amazing, keep trying.
Yeah.
When I wanted to just be like, oh, what's the point?
Yeah.
So for anyone out there who has this dream, who has this idea to write a book, to share their ideas and their thoughts with the world, please do not give up. Please continue to have at it and keep showing up.
I love that. I also really appreciate the power of the network, right? You took an opportunity and said, I'm going to push this out. The worst someone can say is no or don't respond. But in this case, that one person in your network said, let me see what I can do. And that is the power of relationship building, whether you know them in person or not. It's this nurturing of our network and our relationships, which again, really came through for you when you were thinking, this is probably something I'm going to shelve.
Well, it's the power of the network, and it's also the power of having the humility to ask for help, right? Because you can have the biggest network ever, and we don't know it all. We have our lane, and we have the things that we're pretty good at. We've worked really hard to develop that expertise, but there does come this point as we evolve, as we get older, and this didn't happen to me just now. I know that I am where I am because there were so many people along the way who didn't know me from a can of paint, who because of an introduction or someone who said, you should talk to this woman, they did. And that led to something else, an introduction, right? But it is this ability to get out of our heads, to admit that we need some help.
Yes.
And to ask the question, and you'll be amazed at sometimes who responds.
I totally agree. And I think, and I know I'm generalizing or stereotyping here, but I think for women, even more so, right? It's like, I don't want to bother someone. No, you need to ask for help and ask for what you need, right?
Yes.
And make sure you have that clear ask. I mean, we talk about this on this show all the time. It's like, don't just say, let me just have a chat and pick your brain. I hate that terminology as well, but have an ask and be clear. And by the way, make it reciprocal, because this idea of this two-way street, that's so important. You, Natalie, I love so much of what you talk about, and you mentioned it in your beginning, and you just talked about getting older. We're both Gen Xers, about getting older, right? And aging. You wrote a fabulous article. We highlighted it in the Luminary newsletter a few weeks ago. Yeah. I want to just touch on that because I think there are also, goes back to this tapping into our network, making the ask. I think there are a lot of individuals, again, in particular women and women of color, that are aging of a certain age, that are just feeling like I'm cut out.
Oh no. Oh gosh, no. So what I shared in that essay, which was published on a great new platform called 4050.co, I shared how since I was a girl, because I was such an awkward girl and then an even more awkward teenager, I just imagined that I would finally come into my own in my 40s.
Yeah.
I'm now 52. I have a birthday at the end of this month. And what I wrote about were my reflections on the various decades. And in my 20s, I was reflecting on how the 20s kind of suck because you have all these great ideas, but no one really takes you seriously. And you really don't know how to execute on your great ideas. Your 30s are for planting and seeding, for some of us familially, for some of us professionally, for some of us both at the same time in the 30s. The 40s were for me where all of a sudden it was starting to flourish, right? It was starting, the seeds I had planted were starting to really blossom. And I really came into my own. I've written about other places how I think the worst emotion in the world is regret. And I really have no regrets in my life, in spite of the mess ups and the embarrassments and the challenges and the miracles and the beauty and the serendipity that has happened. That I would not be who I am today without those challenges and those valleys. And also the only way we ever learn and evolve is through those hard chapters, right? So in my 50s now, I so relish the magical stage that I am in, where all of those that loopy background, all those different threads have converged. And physically, I feel amazing. I'm a lifelong dancer, so I study hip hop and ballroom dance. I actually just started a great app called Stretch It, which I highly recommend, because being limber and flexibility is so important. And there's so many great metaphors for stretching. It's just about self-acceptance. It's about patience. It's about these wonderful little incremental aha moments of growth that we begin to see in our bodies. And the other thing that I'm really convinced of at this stage in my life is the connection between body, mind, spirit, and being embodied and being not just super aware of how we're projecting ourselves outwardly, but being really attuned inwardly, and this idea of interoception as well as proprioception, and really feeling what you feel and honoring that. Because now there's all this great new research on the neuroscience of creativity that actually our bodies may be more rational than our brains. And there's all this other great research about the gut and the nerve system, sensorial system within our gut. And the vagus nerve, which connects from our brain down through our heart into our gut. So when we say things like, my gut is telling me, it literally is. So things like intuition, being embodied, honoring my mind, where I am in my life and my work has made me only better. And I'm so looking forward to the years that remain for me.
I love the positivity, right? I think I started Luminary at 43, right? I'm not a young founder. And I think the numbers are staggering for women that are starting companies well into their 50s. And in fact, that number is just increasing. I think women, particularly throughout this pandemic, have said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to have a whole new career. And also, like you said, we're coming into our own in our 40s and 50s. And like, that's when we've got the expertise and the background to really back it up, and that credibility and that network. So I love it. I am, like you, excited about what's to come. But speaking of what's to come, you are also, in addition to everything else that you're doing, you launched a course right here on LinkedIn called the 3 I's: Inquiry, Improvisation, and Intuition. So tell us about that course and the 3 I's.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be collaborating with LinkedIn for a new course called Lead with Inquiry, Improvisation, and Intuition. And this opportunity came about because Jessie Hempel graciously interviewed me on her podcast. She's with LinkedIn, and she has a great podcast called Hello Monday. And that was a tremendous help during the book launch year of the Creativity Leap. We stayed in touch, and she recommended me to LinkedIn Learning to develop this course. And what it really is doing is, it's very important for me to always equip people with practical, tactical ways that they can implement these sometimes esoteric sounding ideas that I talk about. What can you start doing later this afternoon, by the end of the week, within the quarter, in order to get better at asking questions? Let's just look at the curiosity piece, which I think is really fundamental to all creativity and all innovation. So many of us have been question shamed, right? We can reflect back on a time in our education experiences or early on the job in our careers where we dared to raise our hand, and we were either ignored or giggled at or, not taken seriously. And so you get the message, oh, I better not ask too many questions.
Yep.
But you can tell a lot more about a person by the quality of the questions that they ask than sometimes the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think of questions as inputs into a system, right? The system could be, what's for dinner? How are we going to regroup after this miserable quarter? What's a new marketing plan, right? That's the system that you're trying to investigate. But questions are inputs in that system. If you keep asking the same questions, you're going to keep getting the same answers. So we have to surround ourselves with people who have different experiences, different training, different perspectives, who look at the same challenge and ask a very different set of questions.
So this is a course on LinkedIn. How do people find it?
They can go to LinkedIn Learning. They can either type in my name, Natalie Nixon, or they can type in Lead with Inquiry, Improvisation, and Intuition. And they can also go to my profile page, and they will also find a link there. And please start following me. I'd love that.
I was just going to say, I would recommend everyone follow Natalie, thought leadership, the tips, etc., but also this course. And I think that now is a perfect time. And again, just regardless of where you're at in your career, whatever that professional journey, these three, as I keep saying, the 3 I's can be applicable, right? And I think whether you're running a team, you're trying to become a people manager, whatever that looks like, these are important. And it's really, again, back to the network and curating that network and investing it, thinking about how you met Jesse and then this all kind of came to fruition. I mean, that's not just about luck. It's also about your background, your expertise, your credibility, right?
It's showing up, right?
Showing up. It's showing up.
Yeah.
And so with a minute or two left, you've got the book, The Creativity. You can find that anywhere. Because, by the way, if you're at Luminary, for those of you that are Luminary members, we got a bunch of copies. But I'm assuming you can find it anywhere books are sold.
Yes, anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Porchlight, the indie distribution channels, all of those places. Yes, and it's available on Audible as well as digital version as well.
Amazing. And then especially for those that are remote, nomadic, whatever, this is a great book, I think. And if you're thinking about starting a company, I can tell you, as someone who spent all those years in corporate and then I'm in a company and building that, this was a perfect opportunity for me to kind of take a step back and think about that. And as we scale and build and grow, so I can recommend that for any of you entrepreneurs out there as well. And then figure eight thinking, I put it up there, figure8thinking.com. What's next, Natalie? I mean, you don't have much going on.
Well, I am building my speaking career. I just got news that I'll be speaking for Google in Brazil the end of this month, which I'm super excited about, and working on my next book as well. So I've been working this summer on a book proposal, more to come on that, but loosely speaking, it's about flourishing. And it's about flourishing in a time of unprecedented amounts of change, or else at least it feels like that to us. And in the midst of so much technology. So what does that look like? How do we go about doing it? And that's something that's really exciting to me. And I'm continuing my advisory practice. So I advise executive leadership teams, but I also have opportunities for people, if they want to do one-on-one advisory sessions with me, they can do that as well. And I'm continuing to dance. That's another thing I'm looking forward to.
And travel and just be this light in the world. Eve Rodsky, so thank you for introducing us.
Yes.
And Natalie, thank you for putting everything that you're putting into the world out there, because we're in desperate need. And I love the word flourish. It's not used enough. So maybe there's a way to trademark that for you. And hopefully, for those of you that are watching, stay tuned, because we will be doing an upcoming event at Luminary, but also virtual, because everything we do now is hybrid, with Natalie and Eve, because they're incredible partners. And hopefully we will see you in person soon on your next trip to New York.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for your generosity and for showing all the work that you do. This was great.
Likewise, and have a great weekend.
Have an awesome weekend.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next week with Goaldigger right here on LinkedIn Live.